friends, are you ready to welcome the man, the person who will take us through the magic behind lasting change? Well, then join me in welcoming an award winning writer, photographer, former columnist at National Geographic Traveller India, contributor to CNN, the Dallas Morning News, USA Today, the Huffington Post, and international editions to a lot of travel magazines like Vogue, GQ, Time Out, Lonely Planet, and much more. Please welcome the forever travel journalist turned into a self-help master, Biju Sukumaran, all the way from Texas, Houston. Welcome back on my first step ever. I'm so happy to have you back, my ninjas. And today we are going to talk to someone, and I'm very sure his career history is going to intrigue you more than ever because most of us have really desired to travel throughout the globe. And today we have an award winning photographer, writer, and travel journalist. So please join me in welcoming our esteemed guest speaker for today, Biju Sukumaran, on my first step ever. Before I go into his achievements and so that you understand the importance of what we are going to discuss today, let me first welcome him. Hi Biju, it's really an honor to have you on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes. So, before I go into it, let me tell my listeners, friends over here, that Biju Sukumaran has had a decade of extreme experience in every sense. I think a happy one, something to learn about because he's traveled abroad and he's been a travel writer for a very long time. So now I want to just get into this podcast today and let me ask him the first question. After traveling for about a decade all over the world, I mean, it's needless to say that you have had immense experiences. How has that, in a way, helped you to come up with the projects that you're doing, which is all about self help?
So my experience traveling abroad was really great. It was an amazing time. I still love travel, but the problem with it is that it is very difficult to do long-term projects, like especially ones that involve self-development, if your job is to continually be moving. When I started this project on productivity and long-term self-change, I was moving country to country every couple months for 2 years, while in the middle of that taking trips to other countries and continents to cover travel for magazines. So that's a really, I mean, great. I'm very grateful and all that. I love travel and all this, but when it comes to say establishing long-term habits, it's not exactly the best thing in the world for that. So that was born out of, in one part, this kind of life of chaos. But also, since I was majority a freelancer, um, that's an additional kind of thing because as a freelancer, you have to bring your own structure to anything that you do. So habits become even more important. There's no one to tell you, hey, you need to do this and that. So largely, those were the main reasons. It makes sense that why travel actually got me into productivity.
So that sounds really interesting. And I think most of the time when we are thinking of traveling, we feel that it's going to be a lot of fun and, of course, a lot of learning. And that is the reason that people would like to do that. With your thinking, as you mentioned, you were a freelance writer, journalist. And as you mentioned, it's very difficult to work. It is good to work on your terms, but then you need to create a structure around yourself. So, with that in mind, I would really like to understand how did you go about taking the step of, starting your own projects? To say so, when it comes to yourself, even when you gain so much, there's always this tussle inside within you, now I need to start something. How should I do it? So, where did you get that clarity from, or was it more like an experiment that, trial and hit kind of a method that you were going ahead with?
Right. So the biggest aspect, one of the biggest aspects of my project is self experimentation. Because often enough, for me at least, I found that it wasn't just one thing that made a huge difference. You had to like experiment with it, and you have to take. People are different, and I have a history specifically of being very bad at long-term self-discipline. Like ever since I was a child, I was really quite horrible at it. And I even have like old journals where I would sit there and make check marks every time I did something, and they would almost always like fade within less than 3 weeks. It was very interesting. So it was quite difficult. She's nodding her head. Yes. Okay. I guess you understand that kind of struggle. Um, so I needed to do that, and so trying various different methods and applying it to myself as though I was the lab, and to see what stuck and what worked was really key to the entire thing.
I see. So, of course, I mean, lasting change is something that we all are looking for. Uh, but to go ahead on that road of, because as you said, I was nodding my head, it is very difficult to get in the pattern of, maybe, for example, a very simple thing, even to get up in the morning at a particular time and have a exercise routine. And as you mentioned that you really had to struggle through that, changing your habits, and it is actually about habits than being motivational about everything, because action is the most important thing. So when you started experimenting on yourself, and I remember reading somewhere that you said that you were a tough cookie to crack. So if you thought that if you could crack yourself, if it worked on you, you can help other people as well.
Right,
So
right.
how were you able to break that pattern, and how have you now got into that lasting change? If you can share some tips and tricks with our listeners today.
Sure. I think the biggest thing is that was weird for me was to actually look at the science. We look at science for all sorts of things, and I think it's very productivity and self change. It's just assumed that if you want it bad enough, that you'll do it. That's how I was raised. I think a lot of people are raised like this. But when I started looking at it as though it were a science and looked to the researchers, they were saying different things, right? For example, one of the things they said was if you're going to start a normal habit, a basic habit that you do once every day, start ridiculously small. And then eventually, that's going to make it so that it's a lot easier to get to the point where it's automatic. And so researchers were doing, and fairly recently, like I think like past the 2000s, were doing things like asking simple questions like how long does a habit actually take? We're often taught that it takes like 21 days or 30 days. She found that on the average it was 66 days. So that's a huge difference, and it changes depending on what techniques you use. Um, so from we were just talking about my writing background. What's interesting about that is that for the longest time I didn't actually have a steady daily writing habit. I just never did it. Anytime I got a commission, or if I had to do something, I would like get into this flurry of writing. But I never had this time where I just sat down every day and wrote. And I mean, it's common sense, but I just never had that. So in forming it, the big thing was just to try to start like 20 words, 5 minutes of something. And as long as you have it tied to a specific trigger, like let's say you get up in the morning and you drink a cup of coffee. Right after that cup of coffee, you start writing. It sounds ridiculous, especially if you're doing something like working out or exercising, where you're sitting there and you're doing the workout, but you're only doing it for 1 minute, right? It doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere. But compare that to the many times in the past you've tried to start a habit, you've gone all out, you've been really like diligent, you're very motivated, and then somehow along the path you fail, and then a couple months later you go, huh, maybe I should try working out again. Like, if you combine that together, your foolishness of starting very small starts to fade away, I feel.
Wow, that is a very powerful line. The foolishness of starting very small tries to fade away. Wow, that is really interesting. I'm glad we're having this conversation right now, Biju, because I think when I was quite young, at that point in time, I'm sure all of our parents, they tell us, have a disciplined life, get up in the morning, do exercise. But I think when you do not know the reasons behind certain things, the science behind certain things, as you said, a lot of the logical thinkers, they do not really accept things unless they can see the result of some, of that particular input that they're putting, the efforts that they're putting into the entire exercise that they're doing. If they can't see the outcome, they really don't understand what is the importance of, doing this particular thing. And I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate, but it always takes a lot of time. As you said, it's minimum 66 days. So it's nice that we're having this conversation right now, because the graduates, the students who are listening to us across the globe at this age, they at least know the reasons behind why, having a habit is really, really useful in long term, and what
Yeah,
it can do wonders, because they can actually read a lot about how it has changed life of a lot of people. And I think they know, everyone knows a lot about all the sportsmen, the celebrities, a lot of them who have been consistent with the small thing at the beginning, and how it has helped them. It has like been really huge in their life in some way. And so, as you're mentioning about, the science behind everything, you do something. So it's very nice that we can back it up with some sort of logic, because that's how I think I work. So
yeah,
it
right.
really helps you understand, if I do this, this is what it is leading towards. If you do not have the end goal in mind, if you can't see it clearly, you really feel that, oh, why am I doing things? What I'm doing this for? So, what we are really talking about here is to take actions, but starting small, because that will just help you feel okay, I'm not making a big change. And that doesn't make you feel very, very uncomfortable at the very beginning. So,
Right.
thank you so much, Biju, for sharing that. I remember that you have a lot of projects in your league right now. Is there any one project that you feel has really been, a revelation for you as well while writing it, if you would like to share with our listeners?
Sure. I think going back to what you said about having a logic behind habits, you mentioned something about the 66 days that I had said. The number is not static. And I think that's really important and hopeful, because the more you're able to add different science based techniques to the whole mix, I've noticed in my own personal data for my habits that the length of time it takes actually shortens. So that's really one of the main parts of my project, is that nowadays self-help is being written about a lot, and often enough people will sit there and say habits, that's the one thing that will change your life, or focus, or whatever they have. Every so often there'll be a new book, usually with a one syllable name like grit, and they'll say that's it, you can change your life like that. But what I found is that there are so many different elements. And when I was conceiving, when I was thinking about all of this, I thought about it in terms of uh, half lives. So motivation for me always had a very low half life. Habits are kind of at the other end. It can be potentially for multi years or a lifetime. So I found that there were so far like 30 to 40 different elements that, when applied in different ways to whatever long term change you have, it's like it offloads the weight from the change from motivation alone, which makes the change more efficient and also a little bit easier, right? Going back to the whole idea that if you want to work out, do 1 minute, do something that's absolutely ludicrous. As long as you have a clear trigger, and it's very clear, and then you have that 1 minute, on day 13, you're not going to sit there and say, I don't want to do it. right? You're going to go, I guess I'll do it. It's only 1 minute. So eventually, whether it's 20 days or the full 66 days, full average of 66 days, it's more assured that you will get to the point of a habit. So it'll be automatic. All of this is based on what I like to call like lazy self-help, right? The more efficient something is, the more we treat it as science and like engineering, the more easy it is to do.
That sounds very appropriate. Reason being, because I think I can take my example. I started off with an exercise routine, and I did not continue it for a very long time. It just started off for
Yeah.
a week, and then I think that has happened a lot often in my life. And the day I got to know how things work, that is the time when I started applying it. And I think, as you mentioned about the trigger, I found my trigger. So, one of the very, very big takeaway from this conversation right now is, I think, my friends, we need to find our own trigger and start very, very small, be it in any area of your life, in relationships, in health, or finance, whatever you're looking at this point in time. Now, Biju, I would like to ask you a lot of questions, but I know that we have limited time over here. But just out of curiosity, since you had this really amazing 10 years of travel, is there any one incident that, triggered that feeling that uh, this is what my life is about, or this is what I want to do in my life further from here, something like that, or anything you would like to share with us?
Oh, you mean switching from travel to like productivity, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. There is a very interesting thing that happened. I was sharing co-working spaces with a bunch of startups in Medellin, Colombia, and they just happened to have a whole thing on gamification. And gamification is the process by which you take the addictive properties of video games and apply them to other things. Like a lot of people are doing it for language learning or just learning in general. Facebook has a lot of gamified elements, and it's like a light bulb went off. It's like, wow, I've been addicted to video games. Why can't I apply that addiction to things that are healthy or things that I've always wanted to do, like meditate or whatever? And so I did it. I did the course. I read the book, talked to the guy who had written all about it, and I started trying to gamify my entire life. I did everything, uh, chores and washing dishes, eating, like everything that I could find an app for. I just gamified. I got apps for it. It failed. It failed. Like that's the end of the story is that it failed, but it failed after 6 weeks, and when I was a kid and for most things, I realized that it had only lasted about 3 weeks at tops. So that was really interesting to me. I was like, there's an answer somewhere here, but it's not the full answer. Like all of the things that gamification did allowed me to do things for double the time. I just needed to find other things that would help me extend it. So that's really when the turn kind of came, where I was like, I need to look at the research behind this and see if I can apply it to myself. And over the years, it's worked pretty well. Like not only have I been able to do things like I mentioned meditation. I think I'm like 7 years daily meditation. When back in the past, I wouldn't even last like again a couple of weeks. So that was really the big thing.
That was an interesting pickup, I think, from your experience. It also takes a very alert and an aware mind to also understand, in a situation if something has happened, if it has led to something, to at least analyze, okay, what could be the root cause. So thank you for sharing that. And today I feel so good that we are able to get to the root of how to take an action. It's actually to build habits, and my first ever podcast is all about taking actions towards your goals, but how do we do that to creating long term lasting habits? So thank you so much, Biju, for sharing everything with a solid logic behind things that can really help people move further and find that trigger. I wanted to move in the next segment, which is more about, how can someone be mentally so strong, or not get deterred with anything that's happening in the external environment, because we will be affected by it even if we want or not, because things keep happening in the external environment. So what is that one thing that you do that help you have your own focus and not get deterred in times of uncertainty?
Yeah, so this is a problem I've had for a very long time. I'm very prone to anxiety and depression. It runs in my family. My mom has this issue too. Um, really, it was practicing meditation. It was really just um, making like taking the time to make a simple habit of meditating. And by meditating, I don't necessarily mean going to the caverns in the Himalayas and doing like intense you know stuff like that. um, it's just finding what works for you. Just taking a moment and saying, just start with the basics, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be, something really intense. It doesn't even have to be something that's spiritual, really, like in the sense of a religion.
Mhm.
Um, it can just simply be what helps me relax my mind right now. And that's really how I define all meditation or mental practice, because a lot of people are really scared of it. I was a long time skeptic, despite it, being a family thing. My dad's he's meditated forever. Um, Despite being a skeptic, I think that the key to remember is that ultimately meditation is about um, emotional control. We will always there's not going to be. I mean, I know a lot of us have this ideal of what we want our life to be, and we think, oh, that person over there, I want her life. But for most of us, it's an inevitability that we will suffer in some way. We'll have setbacks. Um, so that's really the key. Just establishing a steady meditation practice for whatever that means to you, and slowly growing that.
That's definitely a very effective practice. But for example, a person like me who has tried this several times, and I think I got it, or maybe I'm just about to get that, flow of meditation. But it's been really tough for me to, do meditation. I think for people like me who are trying out the meditation, are you able to take us through your first experience of how you started off meditation? And as you said, it did not work out initially, but it did. So is that a process that you can take us through, or a takeaway that you can tell, how can people really go from not being able to concentrate to at least, be in that posture for some time?
Well, I think the important thing to remember because that's a very common question I get, which is, well, I can't concentrate. I can't sit down for that long. I can't do it. I'm bad at it. My general response is that's the point, right? Like I don't. If I went to the gym to lift weights and I said I'm just not strong enough, well, that's the point of going to the gym, is to get strong. I think I think a lot of people think that that they're naturally going to kind of just be really good at things. And the truth of the matter is, the things that are very difficult are often the things that are the most worthwhile. We're all bad concentrators. I mean, it's just the nature of living these days, where every app and smartphone has a ding and a bell and a whistle. Um, we are prone to distraction. Um, but as long as you take it very, very small, it grows, and you'll be surprised how fast it does grow. I also think that it's really important to be compassionate to yourself in those cases, right? We're not meant to sit there and just concentrate with granular concentration, or to suffer some sort of setback and go, wow, that's really good. Like that, this is going to help me grow. Like, very few people are like that naturally, and I'm certainly not. Um, so I think having that compassion and allowing it to grow, but that growth happens. The best way to do that is to just make it so that it's this really, really tiny thing. If it's just sitting down for 5 seconds, fine, that's great. That's going to get you a habit. And soon you're going to get to that point where you're like, oh, I had my coffee and I automatically am sitting down and meditate.
I'm glad
Great.
I asked that question to you, because I think what I can take out from this um, answer that you have given us, or your experience that you have shared, is that humans in general are not meant to, have so much of concentration at one point of time in today's time, because of all the kind of distractions that we have. But it also means that we need to have patience, and the key is that everything takes time. For me, it took me a lot of time to understand this, and at some point of time I also keep switching from that, why is this not happening, I'm trying, it's not happening. But to whoever is listening to us today, it's okay wherever you are. You do not need to be so hard on yourself, but having a habit that you do it over and over again, and having the patience and knowing that it will take time, will help you move closer towards your goal. So now that Biju has really helped us out with with something very fundamental in our life, and I'm sure you might be interested to know more of his work, because that is only going to help you out in your life. So Biju, are you able to share where can the listeners find you if they would like to know more about your projects and yourself?
Sure. My website is scienceofselfhelp.org. Science of self-help, and that's my tagline for everything. So I'm really active on Instagram, and you can also find me on Reddit, Science of Self-Help, where I answer very targeted, specific questions.
I would highly recommend everyone to check out his Instagram account, because I got to know a lot about you through that account, and also Reddit if you have questions. I think surrounding yourself with people like Biju, and getting to know a lot about what he's delving into right now, would be really helpful in getting a clear thought process and applying it. The main part of any conversation is, if you hear something, if you like something, if you know it makes sense, you need to apply it for a certain period of time and see if it works for you. So do you want to leave our listeners with a quote or a saying that you really resonate with?
I like the saying, I don't have it on hand, but it's by a book by James Clear, who wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And he said something along the lines that we don't rise to our goals, like our aspirations of goals, right? We fall to our systems. So rather than, I guess the meaning behind that is establish good systems. Like, I think a lot of us have this idea that, okay, today I feel really motivated, I'm going to meditate for 5 hours today. And that's our kind of goal that we set for ourselves, something really high. But it's not the heights that are important, because they do not lead to consistency. Rather, focus on the worst days. How do you feel on your worst day? What's going to get me through my worst day? Is it 2 seconds of meditating? Great. Then focus on that, and that will slowly allow you to get better and better over time.
Lovely. I am so happy that in the second season of this podcast, and on the 10th episode, we have such an amazing person telling us the science behind, giving us the logic behind and fundamentals, getting things done from the root level of how you can take that action further. And that was a really, really good quote. If you want to have the kind of life that you want and become what you really want to, then habits are going to take you a long way. Thank you, Biju, for being on this show. Please follow us on Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcast. Also, if you have any comments, you like to give any feedback, or if you really like to listen to someone, please follow us on Instagram, myfirststepever_IN, and let me know. And before I take a leave, I would like to say, start believing in yourself, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. I am Ishani Nigam, your host for My First Step Ever, signing off for this week, and eagerly waiting to have you and our next speaker again for the next week. See you!